of Alex Oti, the Abia, very distinguished people of Abia State, Southeast Nigeria, and Africa. I am very delighted to be able to join you, albeit electronically or virtually, at this celebration of the 32nd year of our great state. I must say to you that it would have been easier to have the time in Nigeria to be physically present at today's event. When my dear brother contacted me and said he wanted me to do this guest lecture, I was saddened by the fact that I wouldn't be in the country at that time. I'm currently joining you from Outback here in Vienna at the European Forum. I want to start this lecture on reset by acknowledging that it does take a very strong conviction that one can make a difference for a person like Alex Oti to leave the known to the unknown of running a state that has been through serial misgovernance over the decades of our return to democracy. I believe that anyone who, like Alex Oti, decided to run for office to govern Abia State based on the antecedents that we know of him would surely understand that the expectations would be disproportionately high compared to his peers in the governance of subnational entities in our country. So I have no doubt that he's loaded his arsenal very well in preparation to exceed the expectation if possible. So far, so good. Every one of us in the country keeping an eye on what Governor is doing in Abia State are already delighted that the taste of the evening seen in the morning may actually record those actions and beyond. I want to start by saying that Abia is one of the states in the country of which a lot is expected. I have always said that my mantra is, in God I trust. Every other thing must come with their data. And so, in terms of data for Abia, we do know a couple of things. We do know that Abia could considerably be better than some of the indicators that it shows. For example, Abia State is a state with a GDP of about $25 billion. It's a state of GDP per capita of a little above $2,000 per annum. It is a state that on a fiscal performance ranking of states in the country comes at number 18. It is a state that has about 43% of unemployment level, which is close to the country average. It is a state that is challenged by infrastructure deficit. And so as of 2022, only 35% of the state's road networks were classified as being in good condition. Percent were said to be in need of urgent repairs or complete reconstruction. Abia State is a state with unemployment level of about 18.5%, according to the NBS labor force statistics, before it showed its new methodology. That's very much under conversation. It is a state that sadly became for the massive collection of refuse in its most prominent of cities. That's important for us as the context around which we are looking at the right topic for today's conversation as determined by the people of Abia. When the data of a state is like this, and yet we do know that it is a state with considerable potential to do better than it has done, then the concept of reset is a clarion call that the governor of a state could have made on a day that you celebrate 32 years of existence. In the annals of history, 32 years is not considered to be very long. However, what we have seen of development in recent times is that countries can actually move from poverty to prosperity within a matter of 3 to 4 decades. A very important example is China. No one saw China coming 40 years ago. But when China changed and reset its button, it became an economic miracle in the current century. China, by virtue of that reset, has been able to lift more than 800 to 900 million citizens out of poverty. The population of Abia State is about 4.1 million. It therefore tells us that a governor Obi, supported by the people of Abia, connected by a common desire to achieve the aspiration of inclusive, of shared prosperity, can make it. The examples abound around us. The country closest in population to a state is Singapore, which at about 5.4 million people compares with Abia State at its 4.1 million, reasonably. What do we know of Singapore? We do know that in the early 60s of common liberation from the Great Britain, Singapore was a little higher than Nigeria's GDP per capita at that time of about $296. Today, Singapore has been able to move itself from third to first world, and now has a GDP per capita almost $60,000 per annum, compared to that of Nigeria, a country with considerably more possibilities than the little expected to become great of the 60s. Our country has a GDP per capita of a little less than $3,000. these comparable examples that I have used, one thing comes out clearly that is of great importance to stress in this lecture. It is leadership ambition gap. That's what I call it. The leadership ambition gap. I do think that in the election of Dr. Alex, I am sorry, I'm battling a cough, that in the election of Dr. Alex Oti, Abia, there is a collective desire to bridge this leadership ambition gap. And from the early days of the activities of Governor Oti and his government, it does appear that the button, the foot is indeed on the button for a reason. Ladies and gentlemen, on a day like this, when introspection can only be the best approach for a picture of the future, it is important for me to stress that Abia State has produced similarly ambitious leaders for our country, for our sub-region in the past. So the model of an example in a Dr. Michael Okpara and his economic transformation agenda for the then Eastern Nigeria through the Eastern Nigeria Development Corporation, and the model of his pragmatic socialism, as he called it then. I do think that inclusive capitalism is the same thing as what he practiced. Because Dr. Michael Okpara, and I quote him, stated that his economic model is one that builds around the consciousness and burning desire to raise the standard of living of our people, the unflinching determination to assault poverty from all fronts that has been distilled into the 1962 to 68 development plan, inviting the citizens of a democratic region to examine, approve, criticize, or condemn any part of the plan is the people's plan. It provides for the development of the small village. It touches on the requirements of the large city. It caters for the need of the smallest peasant industry and prescribes the means for the mounting of the biggest industries. Such clarity, quote, closed, such clarity is one we generally lack across our continent today. However, I do think that the possibility of repeating and surpassing what Dr. Okpara achieved in his time is high for Abia State at a time like this. Our collective desire for Abia State to surpass expectation is, however, one thing. The prospects of that happening falls within the realm of the level of commitment that the people and all sectors within Abia State would demonstrate going forward. And so the political will, the kind of character that is required of leadership to succeed, as exemplified in what we saw in Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, is one that we recommend highly, should be a constancy in the governance approach of Governor Oti. His assemblage of cabinet on the basis of capacity and competence is enviable. What now must be important is that the cabinet and other members of his larger team that he has assembled should anchor everything on character. For without character, competence and capacity go to waste. Ladies and gentlemen, in the period of Abia State emerging into a state from the old Eastern State, East Central State of Nigeria, it was normally the case that the concept of industry underpinned the philosophy of the people of Abia State. Sadly, the same cannot be said of what subsequently took hold of not just Abia State, but of Nigeria. And I would say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing shows this better than a graph that I am looking at. It is a graph that shows the 10 states with the lowest internally generated revenue in 2021. Abia State is one of those 10 states. It's unbelievable that that should be so, because Abia State has absolutely no business being on the lower rung of states with the least internally generated revenue. And so the most important thing that I want to leave in the consciousness of every one of us is, what is the scale of our ambition at this time of reset? What is the scale of our ambition? Let me point to one important subject around definition of scale of ambition. The revenue from global fashion industry is estimated to be $1.7 trillion in 2023. The Africa component of that is about $31 billion. Nigeria's fashion industry for now is about $4.8 billion. Why have I given this data? I have given this data because one of the things that a Singapore and a China got right was to play to comparative advantage. And in identifying comparative advantage, the matter of the quality of human capital and the removal of all barriers that stood in the way of productivity of the human capital within that sphere of comparative advantage mattered. Every one of us, whether economically literate or not, know that Aba, the heartbeat of Abia State's economic possibilities, holds an important key to Africa making a stake for a significant portion of the global fashion industry. the scale of our ambition will determine whether the government of Governor Oti will take all necessary measures to remove the bottlenecks that stand in the way of the hugely talented, internationally competitiveness, the hugely talented people of Abia, the industries, micro, medium, small, that are thriving within limited support of the enabling environment to compete with the rest of the world. Whatever you do with this industry could make a big difference to our aspiration for prosperity. Because what we know of prosperity is not that government creates wealth. What we know of prosperity is that it comes from growth. What we know of growth is that it is aided by the quality of governance. What we know of growth is that growth comes from a combination of actions that government sits at the center of all three. All three for me are sound policies. If we have sound policies from Abia State as a government, that's number one, box ticked. Sound policies would include policies around sectors, policies around issues, policies around institutions. Sound policies would be fiscal policies. Sound policies are also macroeconomic policies, macro policies of monetary type policies. Abia State sure does not have much of the handle around the macroeconomic stability of Nigeria. It falls within the realm of the center because it controls monetary policies. However, Abia State is a constituent part of Nigeria. And Abia State, as a state that has potentials for unlocking the huge talent of its own people, must become an important voice in demanding for the right sets of macroeconomic policies at the context of the whole, so that Nigeria again returns to macroeconomic policy environment that is stable and therefore supportive of industry. It is important that the aspect of the macroeconomic issues, especially around fiscal rectitude in public finance and in debt management, everything around revenue Abia must stick at this reset button, would be the right regulatory and institutional frameworks to support the sized operator, and then of course to the large corporations, need an Abia State where the cost of doing business, because of bureaucracies and inefficiencies, public sector inefficiency, corruption, and all kinds of other bottlenecks. They need a state, an Abia State, that reduces all of this to the minimum. Because sound policies must be complemented by an environment that facilitates, not one that hinders. The number three thing, as we reset the button, is an emphasis on the quality of investment decisions that Abia State would make. Abia State is resource constrained. Therefore, In making choices of investment that will deliver the right public goods that are needed for development, Abia State must be prudent. It must, in fact, be parsimonious. It must make sure that for every dollar spent, there is as close a dollar value as possible. Abia State has no bandwidth for waste of resources. The previous waste must be done away with. You cannot continue on the journey of waste. It therefore means that Abia State must have internal capacity to properly analyze every investment option. It must use empirical data as a basis for determining which is the best investment to put a dollar of Abia State public fund at any given time. It must understand the concept of sequential productivity of investment by knowing exactly what to invest in at any point in time. Abia State needs to produce public goods, critical infrastructure, human capital of global quality for its people and for those who already signal that a reset is happening in Abia and would want to domicile their businesses in Abia State. For these people, your people, our people, and others who see possibilities in Abia State, investing Abia's resources productively, ensuring that we have public financial management system that create value for money is absolutely necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that answer the question, where has all the money gone, when we look at countries in Africa that have earned enormous resources through especially natural resources process, is the gap between what the citizens that should be sharing out of prosperity see around them and the amount of money that was earned but cannot be accounted for. And often it is the result of poor management as well as corrupt enrichment by those who should serve the public. Corruption must therefore be to the minimum in Abia State. It means that reform of your public procurement system, reform of your tax collection system, reform of all that goes into the process of public service activities are essential. It means that the adoption of technology to promote transparency of all government business is critical. We have seen evidence that the more technology enables and supports government business, the less the agency of individuals with enormous power to destroy the spirit of public ownership can be assured. So, ladies and gentlemen, the reset button for me will be one that identifies these important areas of opportunity for Abia and in a focused way and in a constant and consistent way, pursue those sound policies around sectors, industrial sector policies, agriculture policies, education policies, health policies, all forms of policies, and increasingly, as we see a devolution of mandate around energy. An example already exists from Abia State through geometry, the concept of public-private partnership in leveraging the resources, however minute, to support the critical investment that Abia State, that Abia people and investors, current investors and future investors in Abia State would require. I think on the scale of ambition, it is crucial to remind Governor Oti that the Southeast is thirsty for regional integration of all the states in that region. The people of the Southeast know that the possibilities of the Southeast lie not in the existence of any natural resources. And by the way, as a former Minister of Minerals, I do know that the geological survey, Airborne Geological Survey, and it was a comprehensive one for the country that we did, generated significant, useful data on minerals around the country. It was through that work that we came to see that Nigeria has 34 classes of minerals in about 406 locations of our country. In Abia State, we found things like gold, lead, zinc, limestone, and of course you know that oil and gas is already accounted for. That's why you're part of the derivative principle in the country. Got salt, kaolin, limestone, and a couple of others that were too negligible to be recognized. But it is not the natural resources that makes the Southeast region a prospective growth pool, significant global economic growth pool. It is actually the human talent. The human talent of Abia is not to be contested. That human talent shows up in the consistent performance of Abia State on matters of ranking in secondary, university performances. However, Governor Oti, the thing that matters most is not the fact that Abia is producing high-performing young people in the education system. It is the fact that the highest level of frustration of young people today across the continent, where about 12 million young people enter into the labor market, but only 3 million of them end up finding jobs, is that they don't find opportunities for work. It means, Governor Oti and your team, that jobs, and more jobs agenda is the most important reset button that you can set for the people of Abia State. And for that, you do need this matter of scaled ambition. It means that your scaling has to look not just at the opportunities within Abia State. I pointed out fashion industry, but I could point out the agribusiness sector. I could talk about the leather industry sector. I could talk about so many other possibilities. I could even talk about the fact that right there in Abia, you have some of your young ones, and I was excited to see the appointment of someone like Daniel Chinagozim in technology. These young ones must make sure, you must make sure that that which matters to them the most, jobs, jobs, and more jobs, would lead you to making the kinds of quality of policy, regulatory institutions building, public investment choices that will guarantee them the possibilities of more investments in Abia in order to support the growth and expansion of economic opportunities for the people of Abia. So, Governor Uti, you are not lacking of the human capital to support you in building Abia State and overriding the poor performance of the last almost 23 or so years since Abia joined the rest of Nigeria in this round of democracy. Governor Oti, it is absolutely possible for you to aspire to be that great leader that enables the scale of your ambition to go beyond Abia and to become a sub-regional scale by reenacting the Southeast Development Corporation. And for that scale to go beyond the Southeast into the wider regions of Nigeria. Nigeria is a country with so much prospects, but low level ambition of leadership to achieve the topic of our engagement today. Governor Oti, it's possible that you and the people of Abia State can lay a stake to being the model state that goes from the bottom to the top of economic performance in a world where increasingly subnational entities are recognized as very credible sources of contribution to global growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a couple of more points to make in the speech, and then I would give us the opportunity to enjoy the rest of our day. One thing that I focused on as I thought of this lecture today is the matter of the lessons from conflict-affected states. Conflict-affected states are often states that are having been trapped in insecurity, reduce the possibility or the probability of everything that I have previously said coming to pass. We do know, in every sense of the definition of what has happened to the Southeast, that it has become a conflict-affected region. And we know in the world of development that peace is a necessary precondition for development. Nothing of all that we have said, sound policies, the right institutions, right regulatory systems, the quality, right quality of investment in public goods and services, of health, of education, of infrastructure, would go anywhere without a condition of peace. It therefore means that restoring law and order in Abia State and the sub-region of the East, as well as the larger space that we call home, Nigeria, is sine qua non for our aspiration to actualize. If that is the case, it means that the governors of the Southeast must contest the current approach of the federal government on the matters of lasting peace, security, safety, and respect for human dignity, the dignity of life in our country. The 1999 Constitution is structurally defective in the way that it has entrusted powers and mandate for security to the central government, being the federal government, far away from where the people live, where the people are. And this structural defect has manifested in what we have seen of grossly unacceptable degradation of neighborhoods, the complete lack of respect for human life. We have seen that in our sub-region and in other sub-regions of the country. Governor Oti and his colleagues in the Southeast cannot afford to not contest the current strategy of the federal government as regards insecurity in the country. We must return the Southeast to a stable and secure space. The thriving of the people of the Southeast is dependent on their productivity and their competitiveness. The degradation of security in our place, in our sub-region, in all the states of the Southeast, and in other states of the Federation, has considerably reduced the productivity and competitiveness of the Nigerian people. A political class that does not understand that development is a function of the people pay more attention to the security of oil installations more than they do to the livelihood and the lives of the people. A recent bulletin from Umuahia all the way to Abuja will be one that confronts this tragedy. The human life must mean something to the Nigerian people. You cannot govern the people who are in the cemeteries. They must be alive. Understanding that you as a governor have limited mandate, limited power and control over security issues, I canvass for you to not be too placatory of the center in accepting a strategy that has not worked. The strategy needs a revamping. We must get security, law and order, peace in all states of Nigeria, including Abia, in order that any reset can work for the people. How do you talk about the prosperity of the people when the people don't even feel safe to prosper? That said, I wish to re-emphasize, Governor Oti, that you have started well. You have indeed started well. You have already shown clear signals that you will use your time in office well. All I ask for is that you please make sure that as you make the decisions that affect Abia, you would make it from the place of absolute integrity, uncompromising standards of ethics, where you understand is the highest vision an individual can attain, and when they devalue that privilege into an opportunity to serve themselves, then they have become victims of the lowliest of vision. The Governor Oti I know, and I know you for quite a while now, your family to us, should not be one that will be found in the colony of those with low vision. So I have no doubt that by this time, when we gather in the year 2028, is it? No, 2027, when you would have been 4 years in office. Short holidays were spent in Abia because my parents would want me to not crisscross the land too often. And so I lived with my uncle. Any of you who are the Abia people would know the duo called Iyebu and Esotu. You had one of the most thriving businesses on Port Harcourt Street. The Abia that I knew at that time was a very hospitable city. It was a clean city. The imagery of Abia as a huge refuse dump is one that your reset button will permanently etch in the memory of everyone. And that would also show in the fact of a clean government governed on the basis of very important ideals that I hold there. It is that whatever choice of policy, whatever choice of regulatory reforms, whatever choice of investment, public investment that you make, it has to be anchored on analytical, empirical evidence. Yours must be an evidence-based government. For everyone that works with you, when they come with any piece of idea, you must tell them, show me the data. You must tell them that you trust in God, but everyone else must bring their data. And I close on this matter of data. Data, as we have seen, has been the derivative, or more data, as the case may be. It's been a derivative of the incredible advancement through technology. There are many things that technology offers us today that we have lost sight of because, as I said earlier, there's too much emphasis of Africa's political class on natural resources. It is the indication of indolence. A mind that cannot imagine would only grasp for what it can immediately see. But, Governor Oti, technology is what will transform Abia more than anything you imagine. I say to people, is that there are 3 game changers for our continent, even more so for Abia. Women of Abia, incredible leadership skills abound amongst your women. There are possibilities of that Ndi Abia will soon be the envy of other Nigerians in all other states. And that when this happens, it would be from the perspective of setting a good example that can be emulated. As all things are possible to them that believe. Thank you very much for the opportunity of this lecture.